All right, now you've seen all the fun stuff already. All right, so today I'm from the IBC team at the Interchain Foundation. If you're not familiar with the IBC team at the Interchain Foundation, we are the stewards and developers of the IBC Go implementation of IBC, which is the one used by about 115 chains. And we're also responsible for developing the spec and coordinating IBC development in general. If you're new to the Interchain, this probably seems like a lot of gobbledygook, but today I'm going to focus on talking to you about IBC in general. What is it? What is it for? And how does it solve some of the scaling challenges that are faced currently by ecosystems like Ethereum? So first, if you have ever experienced this in your degen life, or if you've ever been trading meme coins and suddenly the chain is down. Solana was famous for this. They're still famous for this, but many other individual chains have had these problems. Even Polygon zkVM went down for like a few days recently. This is a common issue that we see in ecosystems that have a center point of some kind. So, for example, when the main chain goes down, that impacts all of the Avalanche subnets as well. And however, today we're going to talk about the inherent kind of solution to this issue from like a retail end user perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about the Cosmos appchain thesis, Cosmos now being called the Interchain. We'll also talk a little bit about what's going on with Ethereum scalability. And then we will talk about IBC and also explain to you some of the cool things that teams in the IBC ecosystems are doing right now. So first things first, Cosmos. Yuri did an awesome job of explaining that this ecosystem, which in the past was called Cosmos, is now called the Interchain. But in the past, it was first called Cosmos because the founders of Cosmos got together and they decided to basically create a tech stack that would allow people to launch a blockchain for any specific use case. It could be for their community, it could be for their friend group, it could be for their product. And they created different parts of the stack to basically allow these individual app chain builders to create a blockchain for their specific use case. Today, Cosmos has expanded so much that it is now called the Interchain. We had to actually expand this name to capture the vast majority and differentiation of chains that are in this ecosystem and all the creativity that our builders are bringing to us. Now, on the other hand, we have our OG Ethereum, right? Before EIP 4484, doing a transaction on an Ethereum L2 could still cost you a bunch of money, right? Doing a transaction on an Ethereum L1 on the Ethereum L1 could still cost you like $50, depending on what time you do it at. But Ethereum is the most widely known and most, I would say, from a brand perspective, most well-known ecosystem we have out there. But with Ethereum, they had the challenge of scalability. Basically, they were like, okay, we have this L1 and it's very secure, but how do we actually optimize it so that people can run transactions on it and there can be more innovation on it that is more cost effective for the average user? And what came out of that is an ecosystem of L2s and now L3s that rely on Ethereum. The L2s rely on Ethereum itself. The L3s rely on the individual L2s. And the reason why Ethereum is at the center of all this is because it all in some way relies on Ethereum. This sounds great in theory, right? But if we go back to these memes that I sent you, that I showed you a few slides ago, in practice, it may not be that in case of a negative situation, then we run into risk from an uptime perspective or a user experience perspective. Now, the approach that the Ethereum guys took was when they created these L2s, and I'm using very simple terms here. I know some of you guys are probably like, we know what L2s are, so I apologize if this is like super boring for you. But when they're thinking about the blockchain trilemma, they were like, we're going to go all the way up in scalability. We're okay to sacrifice some security and some centralization just to make it scalable, just to make it affordable, just to make it so that we can be running all sorts of projects and products for specific use cases. Now, however, what this creates is it creates issues with interoperability, right? I found this quote very salient, where this user is attempting to use Mantle L2 and bridge on and off. And suddenly, instead of being able to bridge in a matter of a few minutes or a couple of hours, it's multiple days. And depending on the type of L2, you may have to KYC, you may be stuck waiting for a wish or a promise period. And so in some sense, while these L2 ecosystems are advantageous in that they offer cheaper transactions and quite often like faster transaction times versus the Ethereum L1, they also provide a lot of limitations for the actual end user. And they also create fragmentation. Now, when I said Ethereum has a Cosmos problem, it is not because we are their problem. Instead, it is because what Ethereum is facing right now is a challenge that the Interchain founders thought about many years ago. They said, hey, okay, we want an ecosystem that has dozens or hundreds of blockchains in it. Now, we don't want there to be bottlenecks around movement of liquidity, movement of users. We want it to be easy and seamless for users to move from one chain to another. So they originally, all those years back, actually invented something. They invented a language for blockchains that would allow for seamless movement of liquidity and users across the interchain. So what we have is now we have two ecosystems, right? On the left, we have the Cosmos ecosystem, which is connected point to point. And then we have the Ethereum ecosystem. And this is obviously a very simplified version of how these connections work. But when these Interchain founders actually developed this appchain thesis, they said, the way we want blockchains to communicate is so much more than to just send tokens. They said, we want blockchains to be able to actually leverage what other chains are good at. We want them to be able to send any type of data cross-chain. We want them to have an entire language. We want to give them the alphabet to a language that they can use to actually build complex conversations and complex cross-chain workflows. And what they invented was the IBC protocol. Today, the IBC protocol has 115 IBC-enabled chains, about 3 billion in 30-day transaction volume just for transfers. And we also have 22 seconds for average time of packet delivery for a Comet BFT chain. Another interesting thing about IBC protocol is that the core protocol has never been exploited. Now, of course, knock on wood, there's always smart contract and code risk. But for us, that's a huge win to know that our light client-based interoperability has proven to be battle-tested and secure. And that is one of the reasons why so many chains and teams have continued to adopt it on an ongoing basis. Now, the interesting thing about IBC is it solves the scalability problem in more than just one way. It's not just that it allows for easier movement of users and liquidity. The IBC feature set is so rich that it allows chains to actually leverage the other capabilities of other chains and actually increase their throughput and their output. So with the IBC feature set, you can send and receive data, any type of data as long as it's encoded in bytes, so chains can truly communicate with each other. They can also read a counterparty's state through things like interchain queries, and they can also write a counterparty's state. And this is through different features within the IBC feature set. Now, I will show you some of the teams who are actually using this in real life. First things first, we have Noble. They're actually inside there. But they're building liquidity infrastructure for the IBC network for USDC and other real-world assets. Yeah, they have just passed 1 billion in 30-day IBC volume. So congratulations, guys. That is excellent. And the interesting thing about what they've done is they've actually connected the IBC network to to Circle's interoperability solution to bring in seamless USDC into the network. So they've added a ton of value to the ecosystem through the architecture that they've built. The next really interesting project that I want to talk to you about is a project called Stride, and they're doing cross-chain liquid staking. So when I said that a chain could read and write a counterparty chain state, that's exactly what Stride is doing with what they have built. They use a feature called Interchain Accounts, which allows for cross-chain account control so that from the Stride front end on the Stride chain, a user can seamlessly and easily stake to or liquid stake on any of these supported chains. And you can actually see this flow here. So the actual, all of these transactions are happening over IBC via this Interchain Accounts feature, where the Stride blockchain is actually controlling an account on the Atom blockchain and is liquid staking through that way. And then they're also using interchain queries to query the balance of the chain and then mint the appropriate assets on the Stride Zone side. Next, we have Celestia, and they're doing data availability for rollups. Celestia is really interesting because they have brought in key rollup infrastructure into the IBC network. If you've probably heard of them, TIA. They're quite big. And they're really interesting because they are basically bringing in key infrastructure and support for rollups within IBC. And then finally, we have a project called Stargaze, and they have done interchain NFTs and also interchain names. So they use IBC to, on the Stargaze network, you can do things like mint, sell NFTs, etc., exactly what you'd expect. But through the IBC feature ICS 721, all those NFTs can actually go cross-chain, which means suddenly your NFT that was on Stargaze can suddenly go to any of the other supported chains. They also have another IBC-enabled feature called interchain names. So if you're familiar with ENS names, we have the same thing from an IBC perspective. You can claim your name, and then it actually works on any of these supported chains within the IBC network. So you can be yourself 115 times over. And that is it, everyone. If you have any questions about IBC, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you for your time today.